be playing Guyman, and I think Sooner fans would be fired up, right? All this anticipation, it builds throughout the offseason, any offseason, right? Like when you're going into any year, you anticipate game one. And I think the anticipation's high for game one, clearly, but you hit on it. The big build-up for this is going into the SEC. There's some new logos on the field over there. We got the SEC painted on the field now, which is interesting to see. SEC will be on the jerseys. That's the only real taste of the SEC we'll get for about a month, really, until Tennessee comes to town in September. But, man, fired up for this one. Glad college football is back. Doesn't matter the opponent. Just excited that we get to watch actual games instead of talking about them, you know?
Really glad it's back. The atmosphere here is incredible. By the way, Guyman would be really excited if they were playing Oklahoma tonight as well. Look, the Temple Owls, they're not a team that's going to strike fear into anyone's hearts, but it's game one of a season, right? To me, this is about setting a tone for what this season is going to be, and I think it's also about building confidence, especially in some of the younger position groups.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and you start at quarterback, right? That's the focus of everybody, and you mentioned young. Jackson Arnold coming in as a sophomore now, technically, but he didn't have much experience as a true freshman, so curious to see how he handles officially being the starter. We've talked about this before. He did start the game against Arizona, but he was more of a replacement starter there opposed to being named the guy. Now he is the guy. Curious how he handles that role, being so young, leading a locker room full of grown men, really.
And he was named a captain for this first matchup, which when you look at the other captains, guys that have played a lot of college football, it speaks to, I think, the ownership that he's taken of that position and of this football team.
Yeah, that, and it says something that he's been able to earn the respect of these guys at such a young age. And as a quarterback, you're supposed to do that, right? You're supposed to be that leader. But in a team that's kind of returned quite a few pieces on both sides of the ball in terms of veteran leadership, cool to see that the sophomore, I guess, quarterback has kind of taken those reins. Some other young position groups, maybe not necessarily in age, but in experience. Everybody wants to talk about the offensive line. It's not glamorous for us to sit here and talk about offensive line play, but it is a concern, I think, for this team going into the season.
Offensive line play isn't glamorous, but I would say it's arguably as important as any element of this football team, especially considering the conference that you're going to be playing in 2024. The line of scrimmage is what separates the SEC from everyone else and really has separated the SEC from everyone else for 2 decades. Bill Bedenbaugh is arguably the best in the business at what he does. This is a group, though, that has a lot of turnover, and when you hear the reports in fall camp, they've struggled a little bit. That is one-on-one, so they're playing the good ones from the Oklahoma defense, but it is an area of concern, and it's something that I think they're going to have to establish in these first 3 games before Tennessee comes to town. And once again, to my initial point, like, this is about gaining confidence, I think, especially with the quarterback and that offensive line group, which they're going to have to develop chemistry as well, right? We've seen Bill Bedenbaugh throw 5 guys out there in game number 1, and that's not necessarily the 5 guys that are going to be there for the entire season.
One guy we expect to probably start, but should play a significant amount, Jacob Sexton, Edmond Deer Creek native, so that'll be good for some Oklahoma ties there. One thing I want to hit on, every season opener, there is always going to be an overreaction. So I'm curious what your overreaction, what your prediction for the overreaction is going to be. Is it going to be a good overreaction? You know, like Jackson Arnold's going to win the Heisman? Is it going to be a bad one, like our offensive line sucks and the season's going to be a disaster? Like, what is the Sooner fan overreaction you think is going to happen?
Well, look, if this game is 63-10, then it's going to be national championship. If this game is, like 35-13, I think there's going to be a little bit of panic, and this team is doomed once they start conference play. So depending on how the game goes, that's going to go a long way into the overreaction. I'll just say, I think for me, I expect they're going to score a lot of points. I expect that they are going to get the offense and all the weapons, a lot of opportunities in this game, and really see what they have, really flex what this new offense is under Seth Luttrell. So I'll say that it's something offensive / Jackson Arnold related. How about you?
I think it's going to be on the defensive side. We can get into that here in a minute when we talk defense, but my overreaction has to do with the defensive side. One quick note, though, on the wide receiver group. We've talked a lot about this being maybe the position group we're most confident with, and they need to be confident in that group with some of the injuries that have happened. Obviously, Jaden Gibson's been out for a couple weeks now. He got hurt in fall camp. But then Nick Anderson's also dealing with an injury, too. Those are two of the guys you expected to be the leaders of that group and maybe statistical leaders, and you don't have them. So I think this is where you really see the confidence, the ability of this wide receiver room take shape, because it feels like they're really deep.
The amount of times I've talked about the receiver room this offseason, I can't even count.
I know.
And every time it's been glowing reviews, right? They are loaded with talent. And I always start listing the names, and it's Jaden Gibson, it's Nick Anderson, it's Andrell Anthony, Deion Burks. 3 of the 4 guys I just mentioned, 2 of them are not playing tonight. That's Jaden Gibson and Nick Anderson. Andrell Anthony is playing, or I should say available, for the first time since he had the season-ending injury a year ago. So he's available. That doesn't mean he's going to play. And Deion Burks has never taken a snap at Oklahoma. Yep. So that is a position that is loaded with talent. Some of that talent is not on the field tonight, and some of it is having to get worked into a new offense with a new coordinator and a new quarterback. So I don't know, exactly which of those guys is ultimately going to see the lion's share of the targets. I would imagine Deion Burks has his moments, but I think they're going to spread the football around quite a bit. And maybe a name that nobody's talking about ultimately comes out of tonight as a lookout for this wide receiver.
I'll give you 2 because you didn't name one of them. Jaleel Farouk is one that we seem to always forget about, and I think it's just because he's been here for so long.
That's right.
He's a guy that just does his job, not flashy. I think that's a guy that ends up getting a good amount of targets. Another one that Brent Venables has hit on a bunch during camp, J.J. Hester. Booker T stand up, 918. I think he's a guy that has a chance to really play well. He's had a ton of flashes. He's shown potential during camp. He's shown potential when he was in high school when we covered him. I think that's a guy that could step up as well. Similar frame to a Jaden Gibson, like a long, lanky guy, rangy, can run. So I would expect to see J.J. Hester maybe make some noise there too. So you want to talk defense?
I got one more offensive question for you before we move on to defense. I watched a lot of college football yesterday. I'm sure you
I did.
Got as much in as you could while also being at Tulsa's game. I saw some quarterbacks brought into the game slowly, right? Establish the run game, maybe a screen pass early, gain some confidence. I also saw some first play shots, right? Go for the home run ball out of the gate.
Yep.
When you look at Jackson Arnold going into this season, how do you see potentially the start of this game and what they do with him? Is it more, let's bring him in slowly, establish some confidence, or you think they unleash the full arsenal out of the gate?
Well, you don't want to show too much, right? Like, that's a thing. Coaches are paranoid. You don't want to show too much in the first game, especially against Temple, right? But he's played already. He's gotten those college reps, so for the game reps. So for me, I think you get him acclimated by getting him hit. And so I think you see more QB run game stuff early, just to kind of get him comfortable and settled into the game. I don't think you have to worry about, a quick screen, quick out to kind of get him a completion and get settled in. Honestly, I think it's QB run game, and if not that, I think you go to the shots. Because, again, I think he's shown that he's capable of playing in college. It's not a guy that you're starting fresh out of high school or a guy that's just coming out of the portal. Like, he's been here and done that. I would be surprised if they didn't take some early shots. And then, again, get him involved in the run game just a little bit. I always felt like the pregame jitters went away when I got hit.
Yes.
Right? So,
100%.
So I think that will help him settle in a little bit. So I think that would be my expectation there.
Every level I think anybody has ever played, as soon as you feel that contact, the nerves kind of go away and you're able to really dial in. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, like in practice, quarterbacks didn't get hit, right? So like you don't get touched very often in fall camp. I'm not sure if they tackled during camp. My guess is they probably didn't. They probably thudded up on him and let him go.
Yeah.
So getting hit, getting tackled to the ground, I think would be a nice way to wake up.
I will say this place might actually melt down, not only from the heat, but from just the sheer excitement if Jackson Arnold hits a deep ball on possession number 1 tonight. We mentioned the defense, and that's what everyone is hanging their hat on going into this 2024 season. One of the best defenses in college football, a couple All-Americans on this defense. They returned 79% of last season's defensive production. They are loaded at all 3 levels. Newcomers that we expect to be difference makers at all 3 levels. I guess, what is your biggest takeaway from this defense in terms of expectation for tonight?
Yeah, I think the overreaction that I'll get into is that if they end up shutting out Temple out or allowing 3 or a garbage time touchdowns, then it's going to be said that this is the best defense they've had since like a Bob Stoops era type defense. Because
it might be by default.
It could be, but it's like it's
by
Temple.
default.
Like how do we won't glean anything from the Temple game. I don't think. We might get an idea of how the wide receiver rotation looked because of injuries. That'll be something to pay attention to. Maybe we'll figure out, who slides into the cheetah position when it's not Kendall Dolby or whatever.
Right.
Who's going to play opposite Gentry Williams at corner. Like we'll get those questions somewhat answered, I think. But how much does Peyton Bowen play on special teams, right? Like those things.
Right.
But we're not going to watch them beat Temple tonight by 50 and say this is a national championship team. This is a elite defense, right? I think it'd go the other direction, right? If they allow 17 or 23, it's like this defense sucks and they're overrated. Yeah. Like I think that's where I'm going with the overreaction. As far as the takeaway I'm looking for from the defense, I just kind of hit on it. Is who do you see rotate in maybe in the 2s in those positions? How much do we see David Stone tonight, right?
Yeah.
The true freshman, 5-star one of the top recruits that OU's gotten in quite some time. How much is he going to play? And, locally we had Danny Okoye from Noah, the homeschool kid. He's gotten rave reviews from camp, and we're going to see him a much tonight. So those are some of the things I want to see is who comes in, not just the starts, but who comes in maybe the 2s and the 3s.
I would hope if that point total is 17 and it's at the end of the game against some of the guys that maybe won't see a ton of playing time later in the year, people understand that. If the starters are giving up 17 in the first, then I think there's going to be massive overreaction to, this group isn't nearly what they were advertised as. Look, we're not going to gain anything out of this game. I mean, Temple, while they're not lower-end FCS, it's still a team that you should beat comfortably. Yes. And I think there's probably more to lose in terms of narratives than there is to gain. But this is a game that you take care of business, right? This is a game that you want to have your number ones, go in, take care of business, come out healthy, and allow yourself to play some of the younger guys, allow those guys to have early opportunities and see who can maybe establish themselves as somebody that gets chances down the road. I think defensively, it's going to be really exciting to see a lot of those young guys. You mentioned David Stone. He's not a starter, and that was one of the big storylines this week. His IMG teammate, Jaden Jackson, is a starter, but David Stone's going to have plenty of opportunities. And once again, the SEC is about the line of scrimmage. You've got to rotate at least 2 or 3 deep at all 4 defensive line positions if you're going to be able to succeed in this league. So all of those guys are going to have their chances.
Dominic Williams, another guy I want to see play, right? We've heard all about him from the portal, coming from over TCU. One of the top portal prospects, period. Brent Venables gets in from TCU. Curious to see what he looks like. Again, it's against Temple, so you are tempering expectations, but Sooner fans don't know what the word temper means. So it's going to be hard for them to watch. If they go out and dominate, it's going to be national. Like you said, it's going to be a national championship type atmosphere. What's the latest line? Did you see the line?
You know what? I haven't even looked today.
It was 40 plus.
Yeah. I thought I saw 43 and a half.
Yeah.
Maybe?
So to me, I feel like you cover that. That's a hard number to get to, though. Again,
you should cover that.
It's not an FCS opponent. They play in the American.
We saw this team in Tulsa a year ago, right? They
not great.
I just don't see how they match up and stick with Oklahoma if Oklahoma isn't helping them out, right? I mean, this was one of the worst teams last year in terms of giveaways. Now, they got a lot back thanks to the defense, but in terms of giveaways, in terms of penalties, having to settle for field goals and then not converting those, they rank among the lowest teams in all of college football in that regard. So they can't help Temple tonight. That's the only way that maybe this thing is a little closer than expected.
Than 30, right? If it's a 30-point game, it's because OU allowed it to be a 30-point game, not because Temple did something to make it right. Yeah. And so I feel like this is looking bigger picture, I feel like you move up in competition each game in this non-conference, right? Like playing Temple, start low. Houston's okay, not great, but then Tulane's pretty solid, right? So that's 3 pretty good
steps.
Yeah, you take those steps before you get to Tennessee. So step 1 tonight is take care of business, and you hit on it. Stay healthy.
Stay healthy.
That's for me the biggest key for this game is
kick
to
off
limit
the rust.
your injuries.
Yeah.
Yep. So those are all kind of the big things for me. If it's 43.5, I think they cover. What were our score predictions? I said 67-13. That's probably a little bold, but
I think 70-3. I think the defense is going to be as advertised. I think they're going to completely shut down this Temple offense, and if they don't make mistakes, that should be what happens. And offensively, again, it's a new offensive coordinator. It's a new quarterback. It's an offensive line that needs to find some confidence and a wealth of playmakers. I think they're going to flex their muscles, and I think this is one of those statement. Everybody's been talking about the offense all offseason. It's not something to worry about. Right. I think they try to set a tone today offensively, so I think it's a very lopsided score today.
So a lot of fun here in Norman for OU and Temple. So we'll have live reporting up to kickoff. We'll have live reaction once the game ends as well. So we'll have that, and then tomorrow we got more college football, right?
That's right.
Oklahoma State
in
South
Stillwater
Dakota State.
early
Stillwater.
for Oklahoma State, South Dakota State, the 2-time defending FCS champions. Lost a lot from that championship team last year, but that quarterback is one of the best players in college football.
He is, yeah.
He won the FCS version of the Heisman last year. He's a playmaker. Should be a fun day tomorrow, but we got to get through this one at the Palace tonight, and we'll be back with you after the game to give you all of our post-game thoughts. Along with TJ Eckert, I am Colby Daniels from Game 1 at the Palace on the Prairie. We'll see you after the game.